Hey, this is Henry Sanders back with another daily episode of Real Talk. If you have ever thought about what can I do with this coronavirus, what can I ever do to help the community, how can I raise $2 million like under a month, this is the episode you really want to listen to. We have someone who is a ball of energy, someone who loves people, who has the best laugh in the world. And she works at United Way. Her name is Renee. Oh, how are you, Renee? How are you doing, friend?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
That's awesome. Well, you're smiling. I would think after all the work you've done for the past, month or so, 2 months, you'd be like... But you're up. You're smiling. Look at that smile.
Yeah. You know, it feels so good to see the community come together in these hard times. And this was a big week for us because we were able to get another $1.5 million out the door. And we were able to get the checks cut and get those dollars transferred. So they will be in people's hands very quickly. So you got to smile about that. Amidst all the challenges, amidst all the heartache right now, to be able to help is a really wonderful thing.
So you had over 100 applicants, right, for the fund, which is amazing. It's good and bad, right? It's like it's good that people are aware, but it's bad that there's that much need.
That's
and
right.
It was almost $3.6 million in requests.
That's right.
How do you think you move forward from all of that?
Well, you know, moving forward is a continued opportunity to help the community understand what's going on in people's lives. And what I think is really important right now is there's so much more compassion and there's so much more attention to income and what that means in terms of people's small margins of error to keep their housing, to keep food on the table, and to really have that stability needed to have a quality life. There's also a heightened recognition of disparity, who's getting sick, who's dying, disproportionality and that work and those lives. And I think that we have to use this momentum to really help the community understand those issues, as well as to say, here's how we can come together to actually solve more of those deeply entrenched systemic issues and to help people in the emergency, but to do recovery and to really help build systems back better. Right now things are broken. And when things are broken, it's an opportunity for us to really dig in and say, what are the new, more effective ways to make sure that everybody has access, to make sure that all of us have the quality of life that we want for one another. So that's what's next.
Wow. Well, that's easy. That's easy.
That's the work, right? That's the work.
Well, are you going to keep the fund open? Is it a close? I mean, what happens now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we know there are still a lot of emergency needs. 211 is getting calls right now, almost 300 to 350 a day. So in addition to all of those needs that were requested through the grant application, we also are hearing from people every single day. So we're keeping our eyes on that work very closely. And what we're doing is we're helping the community really shift into that longer term recovery. We're watching right now food distribution systems. What happens if we do get to a 30% unemployment rate next quarter? That's what the feds are saying. What happens when those rent moratoriums are lifted? And how do we get people back to work safely and turn the economy back on in the most safe and productive way? So long term is really where we're looking at what does that mean for continuing with housing stability, food access, all of those things we know. Mental health is becoming more of a prevalent issue in terms of anxiety, depression, fear, and to get people, really tuning into feeling what they're feeling, but also that pivot toward what's coming next and how do we have hopefulness and resilience. But then to also really be thinking about raising those dollars to help with recovery efforts. And I think something that people don't necessarily think about is the work that United Way does every single day: education, financial stability and housing, healthcare access, care for seniors, care for those who are young, and looking at what are the root causes of instability. That's the work that we do every single day. So this pivot is really around continuing to raise resources, raise awareness, raise volunteerism to help going forward. So on May 5th, there is a national movement for Giving Tuesday Now. So I think you know that around Thanksgiving, there's always a Giving Tuesday after Cyber Monday and Small Business Saturday and Black Friday. But Giving Tuesday that happens in the fall, it's actually being moved up nationally to have a May 5th date. So we're really going to be using that time to help people understand, not only in the emergency and the crisis, which is still critically important, we have to help people right now, and to be thinking about what are those longer term issues in terms of health and well-being, housing stability, and food, all those things we do on a daily basis. So that's what's coming up next.
When I talked to Michael about this in Boys and Girls Club, I asked him the same thing I'm going to ask you, is that when you're fundraising for all this money that goes out to the community and you're not keeping any of this money, how do you keep United Way afloat? What do you do to keep the organization going if you're fundraising for big things like a COVID-19 emergency fund?
That's a great question. So, we are fortunate that the community runs an annual campaign that helps support budgets for nonprofits the following year. So all the dollars raised in the 2019 United Way Community Campaign are funding this year's United Way operating budget, as well as all the nonprofits that are being supported by United Way. And so that's a really big, important, I think for people to understand, right? The dollars pledged in 2019 are many of them coming through payroll deduction. So all of those dollars are being received in 2020, and that is what's funding operations. So what we're doing right now is we're evaluating for those who've lost their jobs, for those who've had significant income reduction, what is that impact on our budget this year as those collections come in for pledges and those payments come in. We're also paying attention really closely to all the nonprofits who've had to cut back on their fundraising events because no events are happening, no social gatherings are happening. That's directly impacting their operating budgets for this year. And so how we keep afloat is by the generosity of the community to be able to say, if you believe in the mission, if you understand, in our case, the need to allow people to come together, to mobilize giving and volunteerism and awareness to be able to keep our social service system healthy, to be able to respond to people who are needing resources right now, we really, are motivating folks and inviting folks to help support that mission so we can continue our operations, as well as, more importantly, right, all of the nonprofits who are doing the important service delivery right now.
Well, that's interesting because you depend a lot on people giving money, and if unemployment's up, that means most likely you get less money, but your programming and your funding is going to be more needed.
That's right.
It's interesting dilemma to be in. I agree with about events because we have one of our big revenue for us, our leadership summit that we have in October. And we're trying to figure out what do we do with that. So it's a big thing. So I get it. Now, I hope that you have a plan to deal with all the unemployment and fundraise because, you're going to be needed more in months to come. I believe that, really.
Yeah, that's something I think that people are often surprised by. There's a very inverse relationship in terms of our business model. And not to make that sound all technical, but truly, when needs are greater, resources are typically less. And so for us to be nimble and, like you said, having a plan to be able to help people understand. And, this is really the beautiful thing about United Way. It's when everybody participates a little bit, we're able to have a larger ability and a resource base. And that can be more efficient in terms of getting more people helped. And I think that sometimes, people are a little bit fearful of the fact that United Way is a larger organization, or they feel like, power is sort of held in a smaller decision-making base. But really, this is United Way by the community for the community. And when we get the donations from so many different people, you can actually amplify the impact because all those contributions come together, and then you can have decisions that really fundamentally focus in on root causes and really build more stability, as I said, for more people than what we can do individually. But yeah, it's really a hard time right now, and I feel for you and your leadership conference. It's such a beautiful event to bring everybody together. I know Sagacious is doing her conference online, so maybe there's something that you guys can do where you can still have people participating virtually.
Yeah, we're trying to plan all that right now, so but I get the pain. So for our viewers right now, if someone's in Green Bay or Milwaukee or wherever in the state of Wisconsin, they're like, you know what? We need to create a fund. We need to raise $2 million. And how would you tell people to start that? I mean, it's such a big number. how do you tell people to start? How would you say?
Yeah.
You
Well,
can
I
do
would
this
tell
and
people,
start it?
first of all, evaluate what's already happening. So I'm on a call with all the state United Way leaders, which is representative of every county across Wisconsin, and there are already funds happening across every community. And so, there might be some smaller communities that aren't included, but I would imagine that for most geographic areas across Wisconsin, and certainly nationally, there are already funds that are popping up. And so the first thing I would say is see what's already happening in your community and if there's a way to collaborate and partner. I think much like the beautifully innovative partnership with Selfless Ambition and Boys and Girls Club and United Way, it allows a more cohesive message and it allows a bigger reach. And again, when we can aggregate those resources, you can actually make a more effective impact to help actually more people than individual slices and funds can do. So that would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would be is you really, help tell the story, help people understand what's going on. The fundraising part is actually quite easy compared to the investment in getting the money back into the community. I think people don't really get oftentimes how hard it is to give dollars away effectively, and and how many emotions come into those resources because everybody is so desperate to get help to be able to serve their missions and serve their populations. And so that is such a hard part of the work in terms of how are resources allocated, who gets access to those. And so I would be really thoughtful in terms of who's going to be receiving those resources, what is an equitable way to make sure that there's a process in place to show respect and thoughtfulness about where dollars need to go, and to really understand what are the needs and who's delivering on those services effectively. And the fact of the matter is, and I appreciate the love for the $2 million. It's not enough, right? We need more resources. So, we had $2 million requested that weren't able to be funded. We know there are many other organizations who didn't apply who are needing support. There are many families right now who are looking for food, for eviction prevention resources, for mental health and telehealth services that aren't getting that right now. And so, being really sharp about what those dollars are needed for, and to really compel and educate and tell the story about here's what we'll do when we receive those resources, and here's who's going to be helped, and then being accountable for what actually happens. So those would be some tips that I would suggest.
Yeah. Well, I also want to applaud you on having such a broad committee. I know Miss Nichols was in the chair of that. So how you doing, Miss Nichols? Shout out to you. Well, she's the mother of the community.
Thank you, Barbara.
So we love you and everything you're doing. So thank you so much for helping. What would be a year from now, Renee? This time next year, what would you be able to say, look back and say, it was a success. We did what we said we were supposed to do. A year from now, you look back and say, yep, we did it. What does that look like for United Way?
Yeah. So a year from now, I would hope that we have more stability, right? So a year from now, I would hope that our public health crisis has really been under control. Is there some sort of solution in terms of vaccine, more effective treatment so that everyone can be healthy, right? I mean, that's the most important thing, is being safe and healthy. So, and hopefully the economy is turned back on. Right now, some of the forecasts that are happening, and people don't know yet, we don't have enough data yet, but if gross domestic product, or GDP, is down 5% is a number that's being tossed around right now, 5-6%. That's dramatic, right? I mean, talking about unemployment. So I hope a year from now, we have certainly overcome much of that, and we've got people safely back to work with incomes flowing, and the economy is stronger. I also hope a year from now there is significantly more awareness around housing stability, wages, and what that means for people to be able to pay for their food, their housing, their basic needs, plus that little bit extra that allows people to have the quality of life that reduces stress, that increases family cohesion. All of those things we care deeply about, to have strong, stable families inside of schools where kids are being educated and their brains turned on and their hearts full of love and connectivity and respect and value, where they have a sense of hope for their future. Those are all the things that I hope a year from now we've been able to talk about. So, and I hope that there's a larger community understanding of the issues that are prevalent each and every day, right? It's this type of a crisis opens people's eyes, and because there is an external health crisis and an external policy decision that everyone needs to stay at home right now, there is much more compassion for those who don't have incomes and the struggles they're going through. These are the same struggles that people are going through when they are working not in a pandemic. And so, the ability for people to understand that stress when people are doing everything right and still not able to afford rent, that's 30% of their income because they're paying 50, 60, 70% of their incomes, and the other expenses of life, and what that does in terms of a toll, in terms of stress, impact in families, the ability to perform in jobs and at school, all of those things. I hope there's a raised consciousness that activates more people to create the movements that we need to build in that stability through policy, through nonprofit support systems. There's a way to do things better, right? I think that technology will how we're communicating right now, right? Instead of being together in a studio, having all of us at our homes doing this work, it's going to change a lot how business is done, how service delivery happens. And I don't think a year from now we'll have all that figured out, but we'll have a big insight into the new way forward post-coronavirus.
So, Renee, I want to switch off of the COVID-19 stuff, and just for the leaders who are trying to lead right now, who are trying to be at home, some who have kids like me who are trying to homeschool, who have partners or a marriage, what 3 tips would you give leaders to thrive, be successful at this time? 3 tips.
Yeah, 3 tips. Number 1, recognize this is unprecedented. Nobody knows what to do, and everybody is figuring it out as we go. So give yourself the permission to understand that we got to figure it out, and that's the way it is, and not to to carry too heavy of a burden around that. Number 2 would be to check in with your teams and make sure their health and wellness is really at the top of mind. There is so much going on right now across all of our different partners and in the community, and a lot of just fear of the unknown, anxiety about what's happening, and then, of course, just the day-to-day stress. And for those who do have sickness in their homes, for those who care deeply about those who have been impacted by loss of income, just to make sure that we have extra compassion right now, because that's such an important thing. And third is, you can't take care of anyone else if you don't take care of yourself, right? And so I think that the guilt and the frustration that sometimes comes from taking that break when you just know there's so much to be done and there's so much you need to help with, and just to go. I fall into that trap quite a lot. But it's, when we're working at home, for me, it's hard to find a place to stop because you're just on. And even though I'm hearing my kids and knowing that I want to have dinners together, you just have to, help yourself not feel guilty about that and say, you've got to take care of yourself because you're responsible for other people's well-being as well. And so if you don't do that, that's a big challenge. So those would be the tips that I would offer.
Renee Moe dropping some jewels for leaders in the community. That was awesome, by the way. Thank you very much. And thank you for all that you're doing for our community.
Yeah.
I always say when tough times hit, leaders show up, and we can always tell who the true leaders are, in my opinion, in these type of environments. So you have clearly stepped up, and you've helped the community in major ways. So thank you. Thank United Way. Thanks the board. Thank everyone over there. And thank Miss Nichols and all the other 17 people, I believe, was on your committee, right?
That's right. Yeah.
All 17 of you. If I could, I'd hug every one of you.
Oh, yeah.
Hug every one of you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
That sounds great. We want everyone to lead where they stand. You don't have to be a designated leader to lead. And don't remember that if you want to volunteer, go to volunteertime.org, and there are ways to safely volunteer. Particularly, we need help with food distribution right now. So I just want to put that in before we close today.
There you go. We always need help. And 211. Don't forget 211 United Way.
If you need help, call 211. They know who's got resources, and we're working really hard to keep all of the communication between agencies up to date, so we know who's got capacity and who doesn't. So give a call to 211, and they would love to get you connected.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Renee, doing a fabulous job over there, United Way. And thank you for our viewers. Yeah, together, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, together.
The power of many working for all.
She's a ball of energy. She's just a ball of energy. So positive all the time. She's so positive all the time. Thank you. We'll see you next time in another episode of Real Talk. Thank you.